Welcome to Headstones and Microphones Founder Stories, where we use AI to step into the past through a researched, first-person simulation of history's most visionary founders. I am your host, Calvin. While we've added some creative storytelling, our goal is to inspire your own study of these trailblazers. Now, let's meet our guest. Today, we are sitting down with an absolute titan of retail, a man who grew up in the Great Depression and went on to completely revolutionize how the world shops. He turned a single variety store in Arkansas into a global empire, all while driving an old pickup truck and keeping his feet firmly on the ground. I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome the one and only Sam Walton to the show. Sam, it is an absolute honor to have you here.
Well, thank you so much, Calvin.
The feeling is entirely mutual, Sam. Let's dive right into the early days. The vision ahead of its time. When you first conceived of your business, the world was a very different place. What was the exact moment you realized society was moving in a direction only you could see? And how did you convince the early skeptics?
You know, Calvin, back when I was running Ben Franklin variety franchises in the 1950s, I noticed something changing in the American landscape. People were moving to smaller towns and rural areas, but all the big discount retailers only wanted to build stores in the giant cities. They thought small towns couldn't support big stores. I looked at the margins and realized that if we could offer the lowest possible prices to people in towns of 5,000 or 10,000 people, they would flock to us. When I took the idea of cutting our own margins down to the absolute bone to the executives at the Ben Franklin chain, they flat out told me I was crazy. They said the low margins would ruin us. To convince them? Well, I couldn't, so I had to go out and prove it myself.
And prove it you did. That brings us to the original leap of faith. Leaving behind safety to build something entirely unproven is a massive gamble. What did your life look like the day you decided to go all in? And what was the core belief that gave you the courage to take that first step?
By 1962, my life was actually quite comfortable. I had a wonderful family, my wife Helen and the kids, and we had built up a very successful network of variety stores. We weren't rich, but we were secure. But I had this burning conviction. The day we decided to open the very first Walmart discount city in Rogers, Arkansas, I had to put up almost everything we owned. We borrowed heavily, staking our entire future on one single unproven idea. My core belief was simple, Calvin. The customer is the boss. I believed down in my boots that if we put the customer first by saving them money, everything else would take care of itself. That gave me the courage to bet the farm.
Talk about an unwavering conviction. In the absolute beginning, when you had no data, no capital, and no blueprint, what was the one truth you held onto that everyone else around you dismissed?
Everyone else dismissed the idea that low prices could offset the cost of operating in the middle of nowhere. The big city experts thought volume required a massive urban population. But the truth I held on to was that a dollar saved is a dollar saved, whether you live in Chicago or Bentonville, Arkansas. I knew folks in small towns worked incredibly hard for their money, and if we showed them real value, they would drive past 3 other stores to get to us.
It makes perfect sense, but I know it wasn't all smooth sailing. Let's talk about the first ruinous setback. Long before your company became a household name, you hit a wall where everything nearly collapsed. Take us back to that first major failure. What went wrong, and how did you find the willpower to restart?
Oh, I hit a massive wall early in my career, long before Walmart. Back in Newport, Arkansas, I ran my very first Ben Franklin variety store. I worked my tail off, built it up to be the most successful store in the whole region, and absolutely loved the community. But I had made a terrible mistake, Calvin. I didn't read the lease carefully. It didn't have a renewal option. When the lease was up, the landlord saw how much money I was making and refused to renew it because he wanted to take the store over for his own son. I lost everything I had built over 5 years. It was devastating. But I didn't let it beat me. I found the willpower by looking forward instead of backward. I packed up the family, moved to Bentonville, and started all over again from scratch. It taught me to always check the fine print.
Wow, that is an incredible lesson in resilience. Speaking of pushing forward, Let's talk about public misunderstanding. Innovation often looks like madness to contemporaries. Was there a specific product, philosophy, or strategy you were utterly convinced would work, but the public or your peers initially rejected or ridiculed? How did you respond?
Well, my competitors and even some of my own managers thought I was losing my mind when I started experimenting with massive promotional displays and buying merchandise directly from manufacturers in huge bulk quantities. When we opened our early stores, we would put giant piles of detergent or lawnmowers right out in the open. People thought it looked messy and unorthodox compared to the neat, traditional department stores. Even worse, my strategy of building our own distribution centers and investing heavily in our own trucking fleet was ridiculed by the retail establishment. They thought a discount store spending money on logistics was backward. I responded by ignoring the critics, looking at our daily ledger and watching our prices drop lower than anyone else could manage. The results spoke for themselves.
You were always looking for that edge. But behind the legendary name was a human being facing immense pressure, whether from financial panics, internal betrayal, or personal doubt. How did you shoulder the mental weight of leadership without letting the vision splinter?
The pressure could get heavy, especially when we were expanding so fast in the 70s and 80s and taking on immense debt. If we missed our numbers by even a fraction, the whole house of cards could have tumbled. I shouldered that burden by sharing it with our associates. I didn't believe in locking myself away in a fancy corporate office. When the stress got tight, I'd hop in my old pickup truck or fly my little plane out to the stores. Being on the floor, talking to the cashiers and stockers kept me grounded. They gave me my energy. And of course, having my wife Helen as my rock made all the difference in the world.
It really sounds like a true partnership with your team. Who were the very first people, beyond your immediate family, to buy into what you were doing? How did you convince early workers or customers to trust an entirely unproven concept?
Some of my very first managers, guys like Don Whitaker and Charlie Kate, were the true believers. They took a chance on a guy running a few variety stores in Arkansas. To convince them and our early clerks, I didn't use speeches, I used partnership. I showed them the books. I told them exactly what we were trying to achieve and promised them that if the company grew, they would grow with it. For the customers, we convinced them by keeping our word. When we opened that first store in Rogers, we promised the lowest prices, and when they walked through the doors and saw the tags, they knew we weren't fooling them.
That leads perfectly into the tipping point. Can you take us to the exact moment where you felt the momentum shift? What was the specific milestone, contract, or breakthrough where you realized we aren't just going to survive, we are going to change everything?
It was in the early 1970s when we finally figured out our hub-and-spoke distribution system. Up until then, we were scrambling to get merchandise to our stores. But once we built our own distribution center and realized we could place a cluster of stores within a day's drive of that central warehouse, our efficiency skyrocketed. I remember looking at the cost savings and realized we could replicate this blueprint across the entire country. That was the milestone where I knew we weren't just going to survive, we were going to completely redefine the retail industry.
You also forged an incredible culture. You didn't just build a company, you built a distinct culture and philosophy that outlasted you. In the early days, when it was just a handful of people in a room, how did you instill that standard of excellence or service?
We instilled it by practicing it every single day. I never asked an associate to do something I wouldn't do myself. If a floor needed sweeping, I'd grab a broom. We created the 10-foot rule, where I asked associates to look customers in the eye, greet them, and ask how they could help if they came within 10 feet of them. We made it fun, too. We'd have our Saturday morning meetings where we would yell the Walmart cheer. People thought it was corny, but it built a family. We treated our employees as associates and partners, and when you treat people with respect, they want to give you their best.
It's amazing how those simple principles built an empire. Now, history books often flatten a person's life into a neat, polished narrative. What is the greatest myth of your legacy? What is the biggest misconception people have about your journey, your character, or how your company was actually built?
I think the biggest misconception is that I was just a ruthless, aggressive businessman who succeeded purely through cold calculation. or that I was cheap just for the sake of being cheap because I drove an old truck. The truth is, I was driven by a passion for the customer and a curiosity to learn. I spent my whole life walking into our competitors' stores with a yellow legal pad, counting their light fixtures and measuring their aisles, just trying to learn how to do things better. My frugality wasn't about hoarding money, it was about saving money for the folks who shopped with us. Every dollar we wasted at headquarters was a dollar out of our customers' pockets.
That devotion is undeniable. But building an empire always requires a steep personal cost. Looking back at the entirety of your life, what was the defining sacrifice? What was the hardest sacrifice you had to make for the sake of your vision? And was it ultimately worth it?
The hardest sacrifice, without a doubt, was time away from my family. In those early decades, I was on the road constantly. I was flying that little plane all over the country, working 15-hour days and missing regular dinners and school events. Helen was incredible, raising the kids and keeping our home together, but I missed precious moments that you can never get back. Was it worth it? In terms of what we built for millions of American families who could suddenly afford a better quality of life because of our low prices, yes. But it is a heavy cost, and it's something every entrepreneur has to weigh carefully.
Thank you for being so candid about that, Sam. If you could send a single sentence back through time to yourself on the very first day you started this venture, knowing every trial, triumph, and heartbreak that awaited you, what would you say?
I would tell myself, trust your people completely. Listen to your customers, and never, ever lose your passion for learning something new every single day.
That is a powerful piece of advice. Sam, before we sign off, do you have any closing remarks about the interview or the stories you shared that you would like to share with our listeners?
I just want to say to anyone out there trying to build something of their own, don't be afraid to buck the system, and always remember that individual, ordinary people can accomplish extraordinary things if they are given the right leadership, encouragement, and respect. Thank you again, Calvin, for having me on your show. It was an absolute blast.
It was an absolute honor, Sam. Thank you so much for stepping up to the microphone. What an incredible conversation with Sam Walton. From losing his very first store due to a bad lease to completely transforming global retail by focusing on small towns and the power of distribution. Sam's journey shows us that staying humble, obsessing over the customer, and respecting your team can truly change the world. And that wraps up another conversation from Beyond the Grave. Thanks for joining us on the Headstones and Microphones podcast, Founder Stories. Remember, legends may die, but their stories never do. Please help spread the word by sharing and following the pod.